Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Mama's Murder, the podcast where each week we deep dive a different true crime case. I'm your host, Elisa Birdhill, and this week we are finally going to be talking about the disappearance of Natalee Holloway. Guys, I am convinced that either Natalee or something else in the universe does not want her case covered. I have talked about how I planned on doing this case before. At one point, I even had it recorded and it was supposed to post, and it never did. The files were corrupted, whatever that means. Well, I plan to do her case this week, and I typically record on Wednesdays. That is the best day for me as far as scheduling goes, in terms of both of my kids' schedules and busyness, and then having it ready to go on Friday for you guys. Well, on this Wednesday, and before I get into this, let me tell you, if you are the type of person who does not like to hear about the personal stuff and you're just here for the case, completely fine. Just skip ahead a little bit. But on Wednesday at school pickup for my daughter, I experienced a medical emergency. So when I was young, I had a heart condition that would cause me to faint occasionally. My heart rate would either skyrocket or drop out, and I would pass out. It hasn't happened to me since I was about 18 years old, but Wednesday I got to the school. I started walking up, chatting with a friend, just kind of catching up, and I started feeling like I was going to pass out. So I asked her to, stay with Desi and me, because I didn't feel well, and I could feel it coming for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then I guess eventually I did in fact pass out, and I unfortunately, warning if you're sensitive to bodily fluids, I did wake up throwing up, which I absolutely hate doing, and there was tons of people surrounding me, which made me very embarrassed. And yeah, there was 2 fire trucks, an ambulance, all of the school nurses, 3 or 4 of them, a bunch of teachers, the principal, everybody just standing around looking at me. So that was not very fun. Once I came out of it, I felt completely fine. As I said, this is something I have experienced before. Just not in a very long time, so it wasn't completely foreign to me. So I did not go to the hospital. I'm following up with my doctor. But that episode, is what we'll call it, did make me extremely tired for the rest of Wednesday. So I did not want to get on here and record and not do Natalee's case justice. So I decided to push it off till Thursday. My plan was just to record Thursday after cheer practice, which is late, but it was better than not at all. And then yesterday, as I was picking up Weston, because he gets out of school a little earlier than Desi, her school called and said that she needed to be picked up early because she had a fever of 102.8. So I did not get the recording done yesterday either, because she was sick and I was taking care of her, and I did go ahead and just start treating Weston as well to make sure that he didn't get strep, which is what we assume she has. So you're getting this episode late on Friday. Still on Friday, but late because I am recording it right now on Friday. So I do apologize for that. Like I said, I feel like after everything that's happened with the Natalee Holloway case, every time I've tried to record and put it out, that it just feels like something out there did not want it out. But her case deserves justice. She deserves to have her story told. So I'm going to push through and do it anyways. And hopefully nothing else goes wrong and you are hearing this without issue. So with that, all of that being said, we will go ahead and jump right in. Natalee Ann Holloway was an honor student in Mountain Brook, Alabama. She was set to graduate high school in May of 2005 with plans to attend the University of Alabama in the fall to study medicine. Friends described her as kind, intelligent, outgoing, and ambitious. On May 26th, which that is Desi's birthday, on May 26th, Natalee joined over 100 fellow graduates and chaperones on a 5-day senior trip to Aruba, which I am not victim blaming here at all, but the thought of letting my child go out of the country without me as a very young adult is concerning. I go on all of the field trips now, and I know Natalee was graduating and, like I said, was basically an adult, but I still think that I would have to be there with my daughter. I would keep my distance, of course, and let her have fun, but I just don't know that my heart could bear letting her go out of the country without me. I am actually currently planning a trip to Washington, D.C. For Desi. I went last year with Megan, which was actually a trip 11 years in the making. We had planned this trip countless times, and something had always happened. The first time it was mentioned was 2014, and then the second time it was seriously planned, like we had things booked and ready to go, was unfortunately in 2020. That trip was for my entire family, her entire family. I was going to get my cousin from Michigan, and she was going to come with us. And then obviously COVID happened, and so that trip was rightfully canceled. So trying to work around so many people's schedules got really hard. So Megan and I just kind of said screw it, and we went just the two of us, and it was very fun. But Desi is a little history nerd, which I love about her, and it's been a year now, and she has not stopped talking about how sad she was that she had to miss it. As good as it was for me to get some adult time, I feel really bad that she is still worked up about it. This has become quite the side story, and I'm sorry, but I'll get to the point here that she hasn't stopped talking about that trip. And obviously you go to DC when you were in 8th grade. However, I don't really think that you get to enjoy it and appreciate it for everything it is. So we're going to take her and let her see things. That way when she goes in 8th grade, she has a good understanding and doesn't feel like she's missing anything or being rushed, or she can say, I've seen that before, or I know the history of that. And I say all of that to say that I have already decided that when she is in 8th grade and that DC trip comes around, that I'll be there with her. And I realize that we have to let our kids grow and gain independence and all of those things. But it's hard. It's hard letting your babies fly away from the nest. And so in Natalee's case, I can't imagine letting my child go out of the country with a bunch of other people her same age. It's just something that, as a parent to still very young children, I cannot wrap my brain around. And I hope that maybe as Desi, and Weston too, but Desi particularly being female, as she gets older, I hope that I learn to let go of that a little bit, but I am what most would consider a helicopter parent. So, unfortunately, being involved in true crime, cases like Natalee's become a cautionary tale because, unfortunately, she would never make it home from Aruba. The trip started out wonderfully. It went really smoothly at first. Students spent their days at the beach or exploring the island, booking excursions, and enjoying the freedom that came along with graduation and becoming an adult. On the night of May 29th, the group visited a local nightclub called Carlos and Charlie's. As the night came to an end, witnesses saw Natalee leave with 3 young men, 18-year-old Jordan Vandersloot and brothers Satish and Deepak Kalpo. Now, don't quote me on the pronunciation of those names. I did my best. Several classmates believe that they saw Natalee climb into the vehicle with the 3 men sometime after 1:30 in the morning, and that would be the last confirmed sighting of her. The next morning, Natalee failed to appear for the scheduled flight back to Alabama. At first, her classmates assumed that she had just overslept, but then when they discovered her luggage and her passport was still in her room, it was a sign that she had not packed or intended to leave on her own. Natalee's mother, whose name is Beth Holloway, immediately flew to Aruba. And listen, I do not blame her. I would have done the same thing. Like I said, I would have had trouble letting her go to begin with, but I definitely would have been there right away if I found out she was missing. Within hours, her mother began searching the island herself for her daughter. And that is a feeling that I hope me or anyone close to me never has to experience. I can't imagine how hopeless it must be to be in another country with a language barrier looking for your daughter and not knowing where she is. And I hate that feeling. Beth questioned hotel staff, tourists, taxi drivers, anyone who might have seen Natalee. She really is a mother after my own heart. I love that she jumped right in, but it breaks my heart for her that that's what had to happen. Very quickly, attention was centered on the three men who had last been seen with Natalee. When questioned, their stories changed repeatedly. Initially, they claimed that they had dropped Natalee off safely at her hotel. Hotel surveillance and witnesses contradicted that account, of course. Later, different versions emerged. Some said that she had wanted to stay on the beach. Others claimed they left her with another person. Each interview seemed to produce a different explanation. Authorities arrested Jordan Vandersloot and the Calpo brothers multiple times over the following months, but despite repeated interrogations, searches, and extensive media coverage, prosecutors repeatedly concluded there was insufficient evidence to bring a successful murder case, so the men were eventually released. Meanwhile, investigators searched everywhere. Divers explored the ocean, cadaver dogs searched beach, volunteers combed through the desert landscaping, possible burial sites were excavated, even landfills were searched for Natalee's remains. Thousands of tips poured in from around the world, and yes, the world. At this point, Natalee's case had become international news. Truthfully, how could it not? Natalee was a perfect fit for the stereotypical missing white woman syndrome. She was young, blonde, and beautiful. I can't help but wonder if that's part of why the case wasn't getting solved. The authorities in Aruba thought that it would be bad for tourism if they arrested someone without any proof that Natalee was actually dead. It was another case of no body, no crime. Most of those leads led nowhere. As months turned into years, theories ran wild. Was Natalee accidentally injured and her body hidden? Did someone intentionally kill her? Was she stalked and then kidnapped? Was she being held captive? Had multiple people been involved in covering up what happened? Always having trouble with leaning into a theory that involves multiple people. The quote that loose lips sink ships is true. More often than not, someone talks. You know what they say, only one person can keep a secret if the other is dead. Of course, there are outliers, though, and there are cases where there are more than one person involved and nothing's ever said. Unfortunately, Natalee's investigation became increasingly complicated. Over the years, numerous individuals came forward claiming to know where Natalee's body had been hidden. Many demanded money before sharing information, and this led to Natalee's family unfortunately being extorted. I can't imagine having paid someone who said they knew something and they didn't. I'm sure any parent would pay whatever price for a breadcrumb of information about their missing child. So for people to take advantage of that is really gross. Several people actually confessed to Natalee's murder and then later would admit that they fabricated the story. This is another thing I'll never understand. I think these type of people just thrive on attention so much that they'll pretend to have committed murder just to feel something. And I feel like that's a topic for a therapist rather than me because it's very concerning. Coerced confessions, I understand more, but false confessions with absolutely zero relation to the case at all, I will never be able to wrap my brain around. Each new lead reignited hope for Natalee's family, and each dead end brought fresh disappointment. This is something I've always wondered. Is it better to not know and always wonder, or to find out the truth even if it's hard to hear? I always assumed finding out the truth would be better than just wondering forever. At least in that case, you get some sort of closure. But when I found out the details of how my friend Christopher was murdered, it didn't actually change anything. I was still sad, and now I was just mad too. I was still wondering, just instead of wondering where he was, I was wondering how he felt in his last moments. I was wondering if he saw it coming, if he felt betrayed. I still wonder now, just as much as I wondered then. And I think a lot of the things I wonder are things I'll never have any way of knowing the answers to. Even after Christopher's killer was sentenced, I still felt angry and sad. It's been years, and I still feel angry and sad, and I still wonder. I couldn't imagine that being magnified if it were my own child. Over the years, Jordan Vandersloot remained at the center of public attention in Natalee's disappearance. He gave numerous interviews, and in those interviews, he always had a different version of events. Sometimes he admitted responsibility. Other times he insisted he was innocent. Some statements were later retracted. Others were contradictory to the evidence. Investigators struggled to determine whether any confession reflected reality or was simply another attempt to manipulate public attention. I personally think it was a game for him. He wanted to see how much he could run his mouth and still get away with. He felt untouchable, and so far he had proved to be just that. Then, just days after the 5th anniversary of Natalee's disappearance in 2010, Jordan Vandersloot was arrested in Peru for the murder of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores. Stephanie had loved to play poker and met Jordan at a casino in Peru. The two of them were seen on CCTV footage leaving the casino and going to his hotel room. That hotel room would be the scene of Stephanie's murder. Jordan confessed to beating Stephanie and strangling her before eventually smothering her to death. He pleaded guilty and in 2012 was sentenced to 28 years in a Peruvian prison. I can't help but think that sentence would have been much longer in the U.S. I know other countries are a lot better at reform than we are, and maybe it's a good thing that he didn't get a lot of time, but when you have a confession and a pattern of behavior showing he is dangerous to the public, I do think that more time would be better. Stephanie's case made the public double down on the belief that he had also have been responsible for Natalee's disappearance. However, legally speaking, the two cases remained separate. No criminal conviction existed in connection with Natalee's case. Also in 2012, an Alabama judge granted a request to have Natalee legally declared dead. For her family, it was a heartbreaking legal necessity rather than emotional closure. Without knowing what happened, there could never truly be closure. And as I mentioned before, I personally feel that even if they did know, it would never be the closure they need to say goodbye to someone they love. Years continued to pass. Every so often there would be a development and world news would break that maybe it had something to do with Natalee. A chicken bone was found, a piece of clothing, claims of new DNA evidence. Nothing ever turned up until 2023. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. Nearly 18 years after Natalee disappeared, another legitimate development occurred. Federal prosecutors charged Jordan Vandersloot with attempting to extort Natalee's mother. According to court records, he had promised to reveal the location of Natalee's remains in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mentioned this earlier. I did not mention that it was him who had did it. I think that proves even further my theory that it was just a game for him. He just wanted to play with Natalee's family. The information that he provided to the family turned out to be false. He was extradited to the United States to face extortion charges. He again pleaded guilty to those charges. He was sentenced to 20 years here in the States to be served concurrently with his Peruvian charges. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. 20 years specifically for extortion, whereas in Peru he got 28 for murder. As part of the legal proceeding, Vandersloot had to give a statement describing how Natalee died. He claimed he killed her on the beach after she rejected his advances and then disposed of her body with the help of another individual. Prosecutors said the statement was obtained as part of the plea agreement, but because the physical evidence needed to independently verify this statement has not been recovered, that many details remain unconfirmed. So, we don't know if that's true or if it's just another lie and just another part of his game. Even after his statement, Natalee's remains have never been found. Today, investigators generally believe Natalee Holloway was the victim of homicide, yet the exact circumstances surrounding her death remain unknown. Her disappearance transformed international conversations about missing person investigations, tourism safety, media coverage, and the emotional toll endured by families searching for answers. Beth Holloway spent years advocating for victims' families, speaking publicly about resilience and the importance of continuing to search for your child and the truth. I believe Jordan Vandersloot killed her. I don't know if I believe his story that it was at the beach. I don't know if I believe that I think he had help. Like I said before, help probably would have said something by now, especially after he was behind bars for killing Stephanie. That person probably would have felt safe to say something. I think he did probably strangle Natalee, and he expected that to work on Stephanie, and when it didn't, that's when he beat her and ended up smothering her. It's sad to think that had they just been able to keep him behind bars for Natalee's case, that Stephanie would have lived. I hope that it brings her family some peace knowing that her life being taken did help solve Natalee's case in some sort of weird way, because it did show that pattern of aggressive and abusive behavior. I think this case in particular it's an important one as a reminder to teach your daughters that while no is a full sentence, you also need to not be alone with a man. Don't let him take you to a second location, things like that. Because you can say no, but that doesn't mean that they'll always take no as an answer. So I think it's an important lesson to teach our sons that no is a complete answer. A woman does not have to accept your sexual advances just because that's what you want. I find the fact that after killing Natalee and doing whatever he did with her body, because however he disposed of it, he did a good enough job that it's never been found all these years later. I think the fact that he did that and then still proceeded to play games, and I do honestly, I know I've said that, I think it was a game to him to play games with her family by saying he would tell them where she was. I think that was a way for him to relive it and re-victimize them and feel the high of the kill all over again. I'm glad that he is behind bars and will no longer be able to hurt women for the foreseeable future. However, he will not be a terribly old man when he gets released. He'll still be somewhat young and probably still a danger to society. I send love to Natalee's family. As I said, I couldn't imagine what it would possibly be like to... I kind of feel like it's like Brittany Drexel's mom. You just got to move to Aruba. And I know that that's not feasible for most people. You can't just quit your job, sell your house, and move to another country. But the thought of leaving a country without your child, knowing your child is still in that country, is something I can't even fathom. And in fact, just being her friends that were on that school trip, all of those other kids still had to return home and graduate high school. I can't imagine doing that without someone I was very close to. I can't imagine the empty seat on the plane and watching the news coverage from back home in the States. It just feels very cruel that it happened in another country. I know that tourism like that in recent media, the Amy Bradley documentary came out on Netflix, and it has made people afraid to travel. I think cruising in general, a lot of people aren't fond of because things happen. There was the case where the stepbrother killed his stepsister on the cruise ship. Of course, there was the poop cruise that is an unfortunate event. And then Amy Bradley. All of those kind of came out all at once. And then there's, of course, I hate to bring COVID up again in this episode, but when COVID happened, there was like the COVID cruise where, a lot of people died because they had to stay on the ship because they had COVID. I think a lot of people are against cruising for that reason, but also just traveling out of the country in general. It has made people very afraid because laws are different. As I said, 28 years for murder in Peru and things like that. So I hope that if and when you travel, you just stay vigilant. Stay vigilant. Keep your head on a swivel, especially if you're a young woman traveling alone. I love to travel, as I was just talking about earlier in this episode with DC and things like that. So cases like this where it was just an innocent young woman trying to live her best life and celebrate an accomplishment and then being taken too soon hits kind of close to home. So it makes you kind of slow down and think and just remember that a few moments or one decision can change the outcome of a lot of things. So I hope that Beth and the rest of Natalee's family feel some sort of justice for Vandersloot being behind bars, even if it is not completely for Natalee's murder. I feel personally that they probably know in their hearts that he is the one who ended her life, and so I do hope that brings them a little bit of peace and comfort at night. And then, as I said, if you're traveling, just be sure to keep your head on a swivel. Be vigilant, pay attention, take note of things, your surroundings, always know where an exit is. Never go to a second location. All of the important things that if you're here, I'm sure you already know, and I do not need to tell you. This kind of goes back to the flock cameras, in my opinion, and I hate to keep bringing that up. I know some people are so upset by them, but I can't help but think how many, if we use them for good and not for bad, how many cases they could help solve. Of course, there were far fewer cameras back in 2005, but now in 2026, who knows what kind of crimes could be solved or even prevented with the use of flock cameras. So I'm going to end it there because at this point I'm just rambling about how sad I am about Natalee's life being taken from her far too soon, and I want to bring it up a little bit before we go. So we'll be back hopefully next Friday. Hopefully nothing happens this time and we're able to get the episode out properly and on time and everything. I don't think I usually tell you guys what I'm going to be covering next week, but I will this time. We are going to be talking about the case of Amanda Knox next week. That's another international one, very interesting. And then I will also go ahead and mention I'm very excited. As you guys know, I did the Peterson cases while I was out of town over the summer as a theme. We did a month of Peterson cases, and that was pretty fun. So I think for September, I have decided we are going to do Scam Timber. So every case I cover in September will be some sort of scam that is a crime or led to a crime or is a crime against humanity. I have one specifically in mind that I guess technically there is nothing illegal about it, but it is deplorable in my opinion. So that will be September, and then we will officially be in the Burr months. We will be heading towards spooky season and turkey season and Christmas season, which, as a winter baby, is my favorite time of the year. So, until next Friday, y'all take care and stay safe. See you then. Bye.